Hello and thank you for joining me for another new distillery whisky review. So today we're looking at Annandale, which is yet another new lowland distillery. And Annandale has been around for longer than probably a lot of you will realise. It is actually an old distillery that's been resurrected. Annandale was originally founded in 1836. It was closed in 1924 by Johnny Walker, who owned it back then. It was purchased by its current owners in 2007, and distillation resumed in 2014. So they're now getting up to the point where they could theoretically be preparing for a 10-year-old release. Having a look on YouTube though, there's something that surprises me, and that's that there aren't many reviews of this stuff on YouTube. Whiskey Jason has done a review, I think, of the peated and unpeated bourbon casks. Rene at Sourleg Whisky Reviews, he's done a review of the Man of Swords, I think it was. But there's really not many reviews around, considering it is a new Scottish distillery, and they've been around for a little while now. And I can only think that the reason why there aren't that many reviews out at the moment is the price, because Annandale, it must be said, is expensive whisky for around about 3-year-old whisky from a new distillery. If you're not familiar with Annandale, then possibly take a seat before I tell you this. A full bottle of Annandale comes in at around £85, and that's for the kind of entry-level releases. But there is kind of a reason for that, and I'm not going to say it's fully justified to be at that price, but there's a reason why it's much more expensive than other new distillery releases, and that's because every Annandale is single cask and cask strength. So I think that's a pretty unprecedented presentation for any new distillery. I can't think of any other distillery that since day one has only done cask strength and single cask. But again, must be said that with 3-4-year-old whisky, is single cask and cask strength and the high price tag that comes with it, is that really what we want to be able to get a first taste and a first look into what a distillery is doing? I know, and I appreciate that they're obviously putting love and care into every bottle, trying to make every bottle as good as it possibly can be, and I fully salute that. But still, a part of me thinks that when you're buying a 3-4-year-old whisky, I'd be a little bit happier paying, say, £50 for a 46% vatting just to get a feel for what they're doing. So I found a workaround, and you can probably tell, I've bought a sample pack. So this is going to be a little bit different to my normal reviews. Normally, I try not to review things from samples unless it's something that I've had a couple of bottles of in the past, so I know what I'm talking about. So this sample pack here, there are a couple of different ones. It's this thing here that I've ripped apart now. It comes in this little cardboard box with lots of information. And Annandale has an amazing website as well. Whether you're interested in Annandale or not, there's a lot of information, technical information about distillation and fermentation. There's so much to learn there, whether you're interested in Annandale or not. So the sample packs, they depend on which one you get. They run at about £35-40, and for your money, you get 6 50ml measures of different whiskies. And some people are going to say, well, that's even more expensive and that's bad value. But I think when you're trying new whiskey, there's always the chance that something from a brand new distillery is going to be a stinker. And personally, I would rather pay £35 and try 6 different stinkers and learn something, rather than pay £85 and have to drink a whole bottle of one stinker. So personally, I do think that the sample pack is a smart buy here. Speaking of prices, you do need to be careful on the Annandale website, because some of the seemingly cheaper products on their website, and this isn't a criticism of them, just have to be careful because some of them are half bottles. So if you see something on there for £50-55, it's probably not a full bottle. Full bottles do start at £85, like I said. There are also some 2014 vintages on there, so that's stuff that was distilled and laid down in their first year of operation, and they can run for as much as £300. So yeah, it probably is their best stuff, Probably, I haven't tried it, but I'd say that at £300 there is a collector's premium applied to that, because a lot of people like to buy inaugural releases, and there's a premium to be had for collecting those kinds of things now. So the sample packs, there are two different ones if you have a look on the website. There's one that has peated and unpeated STR cask releases in the mix, and there's a different one where the STR casks are replaced by a peated and an unpeated new make. I decided to go for the one that had 6 different actual finished whiskies, but in hindsight, considering how much I almost always hate STR, probably should have gone for the one with new make. So yes, STR. Annandale are another one of those distilleries who are making full use of, well, not across the range, but some of their releases are coming out in STR casks, and as seems to be the fashion, they more often than not seem to be red wine STR casks, which is what Annandale are using for some of their whisky. So STR, the S is shaved, they shave the old wood off the inside of the barrel staves. T is toasted, so they caramelise all the sugars in the wood to kind of reactivate that and get some flavour. And then the R is rechar, where they apply a flame to the wood to get some more charcoal to increase the surface area and increase the filtration effect of the wood. And this all might seem a little bit familiar, it probably does. It's because Annandale has the fingerprints of Dr. Jim Swan. Jim Swan is the guy who came up with STR casks, and he's the reason why a lot of new distilleries these days, whether you like it or not, and I'll admit that I don't really, are using these STR casks to force some maturation on some young whiskey. I don't think it works like that, but that's the idea. So the actual whiskey, like the new make, the base spirit that Annandale makes, they are producing 2 different new makes, and they've rather handily put them under 2 different kind of sub-brands for us. You've got Annandale Man of Swords, which is named after Robert the Bruce, and that's your peated expressions. And then you've got Man of Words, which is named after Rabbie Burns, which is your unpeated expressions. The sample pack that I've got here has got 3 unpeated in the red labels, so that's bourbon, STR and sherry, and it's got 3 peated ones, again bourbon, STR and sherry. We'll also quickly mention that I really like the presentation of these, apart from the amazing amount of information that Annandale give us on everything, which is great. I've already talked about that. These little bottles, they're not plastic, they are glass. They're not 35ml, they are a full 50. They have a proper little top, they don't leak, they don't spill, and it actually even tells you the cask number and the ABV on each one. So no matter what verdict we come to with Annandale, they are really doing everything they can to offer a quality product. So I obviously have 6 samples here, and I'm not going to review each one of these individually. I will do if you really want me to, or if you have any questions about what I think about a specific one, that's fine, but I think you're going to get bored if I rattle through 6 of these. So I'm going to pick 2 that I think are some of the more interesting and potentially worth a purchase. So I'm going to start off with the Man of Words, so that's the unpeated ex-bourbon expression, which hopefully is this one. Matured in an ex-bourbon oak cask, Man of Words. So this is from cask number 152, and it comes in at a very healthy cask strength of 59.7. Let's get a little bit in the glass. I've obviously tasted all of these already, I've made extensive notes, so I'm not doing it blind off the neck pour of a sample. So colouring on this one and clarity, we know that this is single cask, cask strength, non-chill filtered, natural colour. So that there is natural whiskey. Has it got a bit of a haze to it? No, but it is at full cask strength. A little bit of a haze, I think. That does look natural. Looks like the good, honest, natural whiskey that it is. So, Man of Words, ex-bourbon cask, cask number 152 on the nose. Sharp and spirity, but in a good way. It's got that wonderful, sharp, lemony, slightly dry, barley spirit-driven character that you get from a lot of good lowland whiskey. Also an intense kind of sweet honey and pear. You can definitely tell that this is a malted barley spirit, and that's one of the reasons why when I go for a new distillery, I'm always looking to try something which is straightforward, bourbon matured. If there's a choice between peated and unpeated, when it comes to new distilleries, I'll more often than not go for the bourbon matured, unpeated, because it really allows you to see the quality of the base spirit and what they're up to. With this one, you can definitely tell that there's some quality barley gone into this. Lovely notes of sweet gristiness. A little bit of a starchiness, exposing some of the youth, which is, it's going to be inevitable because it is a young whiskey, but it's a well-made young whiskey. I think you can also tell that they are some fresh, quality bourbon casks that this has gone into. Getting some nice, slightly tannic, oaky notes, and a little bit of polished wood on the nose. So let's see how it tastes. Slightly lactic, like a honeyed yogurt note, creamy vanilla gristiness, again coming through from the malt and those bourbon casks. A little bit of a sweetened porridge note, and a little bit of a lemon barley water flavour on the palate. A little bit of gingery wood spice, again coming through from those casks, not as bad as what you would get from virgin oak or an STR cask, just a nice oakiness. I'm also, surprisingly, getting a tiny little hint, very, very faint hint, of a little bit of a disinfectant TCP note. And I'm wondering if that's coming through from some peat. We're told that this is an unpeated whiskey. It's perhaps just a little bit of residual peat coming through from the stills or the mash tun or something like that. But I think, it's very hard to notice, but I think there is a slight smokiness coming through either from a previous distillation run or possibly a little bit of barrel char, but a slight smokiness to this one. Slight sour, funky smokiness, and that's obviously, with how popular Springbank is these days, it's something that we all appreciate. Not as much as Springbank, but I'm getting a little bit of that. As for the finish, long, it's got that nice sour, lemony maltiness, it's got a good bite, and a long honeyed finish. So I'm going to say it, I have a feeling that the people at Annandale, if they watch this, they probably won't like it, but this does remind me a little bit of the whiskey that we're getting from Lochlee, which is another lowland distillery. So I am seeing a kind of grouping at regional style, sort of commonalities between these new lowland distilleries. It's a little bit like a bourbon matured Lochlee, but obviously quite a bit more intense. And the reason why I say that Annandale probably won't like me saying that is because Annandale have themselves denounced this idea of a common lowland terroir. But there we have it. I am getting similarities between this and things like a bourbon matured Bladnoch, or a little bit similar to Kingsbarns over in Fife, or the Lochlee that I've already mentioned. I do think though that this one, for such a young whiskey, it really showcases excellent malt and excellent oak. It is very, very well made. I think my only criticism with this one is that it probably does need a few more years in the cask to really shine, and it is expensive. So I wanted to review one of the peated Man of Swords releases too, and surprisingly the one that I really liked most was the peated sherry release. So that's this one here, black label for all the peated releases, and Man of Swords to tell you that this is the peated stuff. A little bit up there telling you that it's matured in an Oloroso sherry butt. This particular whiskey, it says single cask, and it is cask number 776. It's actually handwritten on each miniature there, and it comes in an even healthier cask strength ABV of 60.3. So let's get some in the glass, see what that's like. I do love these little sample bottles. If I can find somewhere that sells these, I'll definitely be buying some of these empty, because they're just so solid, and just, you know, you feel like you could trust that to get through the post to send to someone else without leaking or smashing. At the moment, for things like that, I use the little Master of Malt ones, recycled, obviously washed out with a lot of boiling water, and they're crap. they're not very secure. Once they haven't got the wax seal on them, you can't trust them to get through the post in one piece. So, Man of Swords, peated Oloroso sherry butt. Surprisingly sweet and creamy vanilla peat, spicy red grape note, and this really wonderful note of like a musty Dunwich warehouse full of sherry casks. It really reminds me of when I was at Springbank and we went into their Dunwich warehouse on the tour, and you have all of the sherry butts and port pipes and rundlets and kildekins and all of those things with all those grape-based, well, not grape-based spirit, but grape-based casks, and you really get that wonderful musty sherry smell in the air. Very sweet, caramel, getting a strong note of toffee pennies, those hard toffee sweets that, I don't know if you still get them anymore, but you used to get them in the sweet tins at Christmas, you know what I mean? No one liked those, did they? Just because they were too hard, but the flavour of it, there's a little bit of that in there. Kind of like peated Werther's Originals. That sounds a little bit better. Slightly meaty sherry, so it's not your flavour dipped super sweet sherry. You get the feeling that there's some quality sherry casks gone into all of these Annandale whiskies, or all of the ones that are sherried. Also a slightly challenging, sort of musty, peppery, earthy gunpowder note. So it's sherry that's got some character, sherry with some balls. So fantastic, let's see how it tastes. Creamy, sweet caramel again, spicy, musty peat, ashy, dry wood smoke. It's a dry phenolic quality and more of that slightly spicy sherry note, but really for a peated release especially, very sweet and creamy. It has excellent mouthfeel and just excellent body, excellent presence. As for the finish, medium long, sweet and creamy. I do think that with this peated Oloroso sherry release from Annandale, the peat is considerably toned down by the sherry compared to the peated bourbon release. I think that if you want the maximum peat for your money and you're going to buy an Annandale, you want to get the peated bourbon cask version. But really, with this peated sherry cask, sherry butt edition that we're tasting here, everything integrates exceptionally well. I think that the peat and the sherry, which don't always play nicely together, are very well integrated in this. They're very well matched to each other, possibly even better integrated than some batches of Ugadal that I've had. I think with this one in particular, the peated sherry release, you do kind of start to forget how young this is. But again, it is at £85 very expensive. For the same price as this stuff, you can get probably a bottle and a half of Ardbeg Ugadal. Anyone that's interested in my grades for all 6 of these, I would give both of the STR releases, the peated and unpeated STR, I'll give them both a D+. I really don't get on with STR. I think that it's very heavy-handed, too much wood spice, too much of that sort of wine gums, chewy fruit jelly sweets. No, it covers up the base spirit far too much, especially considering that the bourbon and the sherry casks they've used really don't. They really integrate really well. STR casks almost never do in my opinion, and it's just not something that I like. 9 out of 10 times I think that it's far too obvious and forced and heavy-handed. STR casks always seems to me like you're drinking distilled cinnamon jelly beans, and that's not something that I like or recommend. As for the 2 bourbon matured releases, peated and unpeated bourbon, I'd give both of those a C+, so that's at the top end of what I would call good. And they are very, very good, well-presented young whiskies. And talking about the peated and unpeated sherry releases from Annandale, I'd give both of those a B-, which is really, really good for such a young whisky. I think that the quality of those sherry casks and the integration with the spirit is absolutely excellent, especially the integration of the sherry with that peated malt. So if any of you do decide to try Annandale, if you decide to give it a go, stump up the cash, then if you want to see what the distillery and the house style and the base spirit and like the house character is about, I would recommend either of the two bourbon expressions. And me personally, I'd go with the unpeated bourbon expression to really get a feel for it. But both of the bourbon expressions are great. So if you really are an obsessive peat fan that needs peat in their whiskey, yeah, go for the peated one. But they're both expensive but excellent examples of what this distillery is up to. I think if you want something from Annandale that's got a little bit of a wow factor and some originality, then I'd recommend the peated sherry release. In general though, if you've never tried anything from Annandale and you just want to get a taster, I would absolutely recommend one of the two sample packs. For £35 to £40, so around about half the price of a full bottle, you get 300ml of 6 different whiskies, and I think that that's the right thing to do. I absolutely love samples and sample packs, and I'd recommend that you do that if you're considering it. So what's the verdict on Annandale? Well, is it any good? Yeah, it is good. It's very good, very young whiskey. But because of that painstaking presentation that we've talked about already, the way that they've gone for absolutely top tier, expensive way to make whiskey, and I imagine that it probably puts a lot of people off as well. I can imagine people like non-whiskey drinkers doing the tour at Annandale, and if they give them a 59.7% single cask strength whiskey, I would imagine that they're being very proactive about getting people to try, like they have some lesser spirits, some lower strength things, I can't remember what. But I'd imagine that they push those to people on the tour, or possibly they're just very proactive about offering people water with their dram. But if they're not, I can only imagine someone who's not a seasoned whiskey drinker drinking something at 59.7 and coming away with the judgment that Annandale is rough, harsh and hot. So really, really hats off to them that they've gone with this full craft presentation. It takes guts to be that bold. But when you're talking about people like us, you and me, to have a new distillery putting out 3-year-old whiskey with such a presentation that drives the price point up that much, I do have to side with Whiskey Jason in saying that it's good, but it's not necessarily worth the price. Saying that though, if they can carry on like this, and I really hope that they do, because I think they show real promise, I think if they can still sell, say, a 10-12-year-old whiskey at cask strength and single cask, and keep that price point around £85, then I think that a lot of people's judgments on the price of this are probably going to change, and there's going to be a lot of people getting very excited about Annandale. So thanks for watching this slightly odd, slightly long-winded review of a couple of Annandales with me. Let me know what you think of Annandale, if you've had any, and what do you think of the price, if you've had it or not. It's just a little bit off-putting, isn't it? Such an unknown quantity, especially when there are not many reviews of this stuff on YouTube. It's a little bit of an £85 shot in the dark. It is good though. Very much enjoying all 4 of these. Thanks for watching, and cheers.